My name's Laura, and I'm going to tell you about my grandfather, Lieutenant Walter George Jobbins, or George to his friends. He served in many regiments as the army changed size during the Second World War, and he was from a place called Titherington. So he first served in the Home Guard, aged 17, in Titherington, which I have a lovely picture of, and he stood in the back row with a uniform that looks a little bit too big, and a hat that's definitely too big. And we also have a lovely picture of him in his uniform before he deployed to India. And he was very fond of his time in India, and he spoke a lot about his love for the place when he came back. So he passed away at the age of around 90, but always talked about his love of India and the time that he spent there in Mumbai, or Bombay as it was at the time. And my father actually went to India not that long ago, a few years ago, so that's his son. And he went to visit the church where they used to go on a Sunday to have church services when they were serving over there. And they still had the slots in the pews where they could place their rifles, so they could sit there in service, not have to hold their weapon. So my dad sort of sat there and had a look around and just sort of got a real feel for the place really when he was staying there. But the one thing I really remember about my grandfather, particularly linked to the time when he was serving, was that he did an awful lot of work for the Legion, and he did that until he was sort of not able to really. So he would sell poppies, and he'd at his local social club where he worked later on as a quarry hand, he would be the one that would represent the Legion and sell poppies and talk about his time during the Second World War. He didn't talk specifically about individuals, not that I can recall. He probably did, in fairness, he probably did. And there is a big regret in me that I didn't really talk to him enough, but it was one of those subjects it's really difficult to approach, because sometimes he'd want to talk about things and that would be fine, and other times it would really be something he didn't want to dig into. He was very proud of what he did. He didn't talk about certain things, regardless of when, what stage in his life. When I started working at D&S and I wanted to talk to him more, more of an interest in it then, because you kind of realise what he might have been through and what actually happened, and you might be a little bit blissfully unaware, I suppose, growing up as children. But he wouldn't talk about the detail. He wouldn't go into what actually happened when he was there, but he always talked about how he loved his time in the army, and he would happily talk about the people he was with, the men he served with at the time. That was always very important to him, and the time that he spent in India specifically, because he thought it was a beautiful country. He fell in love with the place, and he carried that love of the country and its culture throughout the rest of his life. And I think that's probably why he's carried on doing so much work with the Legion. And one thing that made me very emotional at his funeral, the Legion actually came and he had a standard, so they had their flags for him, which was really something I wasn't expecting, and actually quite sad, but also really proud. It was a very proud moment to have the Legion, to see him off, if you like. That was his final send-off, and he would have loved it. He would really have enjoyed seeing the flags for him. That would have been something that would have been very important to him. Both of my girls, my youngest in particular at the moment, serves with the Beavers, so they both do the Remembrance Parade. But she's only 8 years old, and she's been asked to carry the flag and things like that. So that sort of element of remembrance is quite important to us as a family, and so we go to our local remembrance service, and we all do that. We all participate in it, and it's something I think that he would be very proud of. I think that he did actually instill that sort of belief and memory in us, which is good. My children are both very aware of what he did. His photo, where he's sort of on his own with his uniform on, that photo is in our house. It's in my parents' house. It's a photo that they've seen many times. They know who he is. They met him, so that was good. They were able to. Their memories are a little more vague, but they were old enough to remember him and who he is, who he was. And so, they're very, very proud of him, because he's essentially the last serving member of the family that we have at this moment in time. So they remember him for that too. My cousin describes him to her as her best buddy, and I think that was always a really nice way of putting it. He was a friendly, confident, smart, and capable man who was very much adored by his family and is very much missed.